Hello darlings, I'm StarFall Cosplay and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be going over how I made my Halloween Pipettes outfit designed by the wonderful Savannah Alexandra. The art is just so cute and I've been in love with it, so finally being able to make this a reality has been wonderful. I specifically chose Bebe with the light blue on her hat because her and I actually share some pretty similar personality traits and I just love that. Diving right in, we're going for the hat. I'm using a heavyweight stabilizer. That way the brim can hopefully keep its shape even after I have to cut notches for the ears later on. For the black, I'm using a black bridal satin I got from Fabric Wholesale Direct. It is such a nice fabric and honestly, I really enjoy it. Plus, it's from my stash, so I'm finally getting rid of a little bit of stuff that's been sitting around for ages. Unfortunately, before starting this project, I did not check my bobbin or my other threads, so we're paying the price for that today, guys. At least they're quick to wind. Now let's try it again and hope it works, because I just want to get this project done. This was so much fun to do, but at the same time there's just that ugh of going through the different steps and just the little tedious parts of sewing. For the stabilizer base, I opted to just do an overlap on that instead of a normal seam. That way it keeps a nice smooth appearance underneath the brim of the hat and doesn't add too much unnecessary bulk. For the rest of the brim, sewed the two circles together, made sure everything lined up, and then these pinking shears are a lifesaver whenever I have a project that has a sharp curve or any sort of drastic turns. I always get out my pinking shears because they make the notching process so much faster. Otherwise, I'd be sitting there for at least a couple hours cutting notches one by one into this entire hat brim. Afterwards, just a quick press to make sure everything is pushed around and as flat as we can be, and then we gotta stuff this donut with its stabilizer. This part was honestly hella frustrating. It did not want to lay right, and I did have to go back and recut it just a little bit to make sure it held properly. This was after like 3 times. A new thing I've been doing with all of my cosplays that I've started making recently is hiding a star stitch somewhere on the costume. For this, I opted to put it around the brim of the hat, and I just think it's a really cute little detail and homage to my moniker. The only thing about this stitch that kind of sucks, it takes forever to do. Now, finally, we're almost at the end of the hat. Before I put on the top, or wait, no, I did the top already. But yeah, I put my ears on, I marked out where they needed to be, measure the ears, and then I marked that measurement onto the hat where I wanted them. Looking back, I do wish I would have put the markings a little bit farther forward, that way the hat wouldn't pull back as much, because even with a comb stitched into the brim of the hat, I still had issues with it wanting to slide back. The weight of the hat plus the ears did not go very well. The other issue I ran into with doing the hat like this was obviously a traditional buttonhole stitch is not going to be big enough, so I had to do my own improvised one where I took a shiny black thread to match the top of the hat, put the smallest sharpest zigzag I could, and just went back and forth and kind of made my own. Once the hat was done, I moved on to a couple of the accessories that would be cast out of resin. Going back to the artwork, you can see that there are these little spiders as well as these little bats on the shoes and on the choker. So these I opted to do out of resin. My resin of choice is the Alumilite Clear 2-part resin. This one is actually the Clear Slow from their Clear Cast system. It's one of my favorites to use and I love the results. Before I ever go in with my colors, I usually like to do a little dab on paper. It just lets me visualize the colors a little bit better. And just for a little bit extra pizzazz, I decided to add in a bit of black hollow powder just to get a little more texture in there. And of course, if you're working with resin, make sure your area is well ventilated, you're using gloves, and just in case you have extra, always have a mold on hand that you can pour your extras into. Finally, the shoes, ready to get these cute little bats put on. I love how they came out, they are just so adorable. But I still need to figure out where exactly on the shoes I wanted them. Too high, and I was worried that they would pinch into my foot. Too low, and I didn't think it would look very right, so I did end up going a little bit higher, and thankfully it did not really pinch my feet too bad. For the spiders, I actually had these little black spiders laying around in my stash, so I figured perfect time to just break these out and not have to worry about them anymore. For this part, I just kind of painted it on and then cured it. The choker and the garter are made pretty much the exact same way. Black velvet ribbon, ruffles on it, and then I use these clasps. If I'm doing cosplay chokers, I prefer using these little screw clasps just because they are stronger, and for me they hold much better than regular ones. Now onto the bodysuit. I decided to use this gorgeous orange stretch velvet from Fabric Wholesale Direct. Matching zippers, of course. And for this, I decided to start with my center back first. That way I could get my zipper installed right away and be able to get in and out as I do my measurements, and I make sure I have the entire fit corrected. Once the fit was all hunky-dory, it came time for the bodice adjustment. I always start with this basic princess seam design, and then I like to sketch out my details on top. This personally helps me out a lot. Now, you might be looking at those little doohickeys, and yes, if you do not stabilize them, they will flop around. Even with the stabilizer, if I bent the wrong way, they would sometimes slip, which not too big a deal. You just gotta figure out how it works for you. But I used a lighter weight stabilizer plus a bit of fusible interfacing just to make sure it held on tightly. And it worked so well. I'm really happy I went with this because it helped out quite a bit. I was able to wear this back at ColossalCon North and not have any worries. Obviously, every good dog girl has to have a tail. Being this bodysuit is a stretch fabric, I needed to stabilize the area for my tail with a circle of black non-stretch fabric. I attached this using a fusible interfacing, and then next I went in, marked with pins where the straps on my tail sat. After that, I added on to my button foot to my machine, set it for the longest stitch I could get, and popped in some orange thread on top. That way it would match better with the bodysuit and it'd be a little bit more hidden and natural. From there, I just let my machine do the work, and it was all good. These ended up working out very well, and I like how it hid the design but was still very functional. Once I had everything snipped off, I applied a little bit of fray check thread glue on there just to make sure it would stay nice and tight and I wouldn't have to worry. After that, this was a bit too thick for my seam ripper to get entirely through, so I used my seam ripper to punch a hole, then used my tiny scissors to cut the rest of the way for the buttonholes to be open. This worked so well, I was able to loop it around and up through those holes into the tail and then back around. Now that that was all done, I could do these sleeves. Honestly, I prefer leaving sleeves to last with these bodysuits. It's just so much easier. And I am a sucker for a blessed seam, so I always pin at the very bottom where the sleeve hits your side seam. That way I know that will always line up perfectly. After that, I'll do a couple pins around the edges, and then I will find my center shoulder seam, and I will pin that to the center top area of my sleeve. This way I know everything's gonna line up just right and I won't have to worry about it sliding around. And then finally, the dreaded ruffling hell. I honestly don't know how long I spent doing these ruffles, but it was a long time. Thankfully, I have my ruffler foot, and that was so helpful. From there, I put the bodysuit on, pinned all the way around once, and then I looped it around 2 more times. As you can tell in the artwork, there are 3 layers of ruffles. So this was the easiest way for me to achieve that without having to do a bunch of extra finagling or diving into hip fins, because I wanted this project to be comfortable, simple, and hella cute. Afterwards, I just had to stitch all the ruffles down while holding the stretch of the fabric in the right angles, and of course making sure I didn't accidentally stitch over one of the ruffles. From there, everything was all done. Thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to give us a subscribe, and big thank you to all of our wonderful Patreons.